Okay, I now live in Laysdown. I'm a Sittingbourne boy by birth, so lived in Laysdown for 10, 12 years. So I'm only an apprentice swampy, but welcome nonetheless. First thing I draw your attention to is last Saturday was the 13th of August, and on the 13th of August 1940 there was an air raid on RAF Eastchurch. And it was what the Luftwaffe regards as officially the first day of the Battle of Britain, whereas we regard the 10th of July as officially the first day of the Battle of Britain. And there were 1,000 RAF, some WAFs, some Royal Engineers, some East Surrey Regiment on guard duty, some civilian instructors getting up for breakfast, 7 o'clock in the morning. 30 DO-17s, Dornier 17s appeared, bombed the hell out of the place, managed to kill 12 RAF, 2 East Surreys, and then 4 Royal Engineers from a UXB a few days later. And it was the first of about 15 raids on the airfield. So, with that thought in mind, so 82 years ago precisely last Saturday, let's go and have a wander around. Right. For all of you that came from off the island, glad to see you made safe passage from England this morning. We're going to go and see the Frank McLean. This is Frank McLean, Sir Frank, as he later became, and he is posed as he would, as he appears on the front cover of his autobiography, at the controls of a Wright Flyer, and he's known as the father of the father of Naval Aviation. He later became an officer in the Royal Naval Air Service, and but his main claim to fame, and why we're interested in him, is that, if you're familiar with the phrase, he bought farm. There was a farm here called Stone Pits Farm. And as you may know, Sheppey is a big lump of London clay, and it's got outbreaks of green sandstone that come to the surface every so often, and they used to dig these out for chippings for road surfacing. So bear in mind Frank McLean, and we'll go just round the corner here. You will see that our memorial garden is a work in progress. Railway workings are by East Kent College, who train building trades. So this is where they play at, I should say rehearse, laying tracks very well. The reason I brought you here is if you turn round, just to the south of our camouflage building, which is the extension that we're building for the museum, just to the south there would have been where Stone Pits Farm house stood. And Stone Pits Farm was called Stone Pits because there was a big pit out of which they dug the stones, green sandstone, for road surfacing, and I and some of the party are standing in it. And it would have run up to this cement line, down to the corner there, back up again. And in 1909, when Frank McLean bought Stone Pits Farm, this would have been a big open pit. And in 1909, every time you use an aircraft, you're most likely to damage it. It's going to come to a sudden halt in one form or another. So beneath my feet are probably the wooden canvas will have gone, but the nuts, bolts, screws, levers, engine parts. So if you know anybody with deep ground penetrating radar, do please let me know. The station building for a branch line that comes in from the Sheppey Light Railway. We're on the road side of it. We'll go round the back and onto the rail side in a moment. Come over to warn you, I'm going to ask you a trick question. And the trick question is, you can just see a hazy line of silver running from left to right. That's the southern shore of Sheppey. And I'm going to ask you, how far do you think we are from the River Swale? Yeah?
That and a bit more.
3 miles.
Yeah.
3 miles?
3 miles.
Anybody else?
4 miles.
4 miles. Okay. The correct answer is 250 miles because the River Swale runs through North Yorkshire. That is the swale,
Yes. Not the
saline
river swale.
throughout,
Yeah.
tidal throughout, has no rising point. It's a branch of the sea,
Yes.
not a river.
Yeah.
Even though there is one issue of Ordnance Survey that calls it the River Swale, it's not a river.
Very good.
Far more important is over here, these buildings that you can see in the distance with the green fence round them, and they are 1912 repair hangars built for the Royal Naval Air Service, and I am desperate to get my hands on them because they're standing empty at the moment. And what I want to do is turn the first two into a paying museum, because you can see the first two, the roofs are on, but the doors and windows are void at the moment. So they're full of rats, cats and pigeons. And then the further pair, you can see the roof is breached. What we want to do is to take those, strip them back to their chassis, to the framework, and then restore them back to 1912 hangar status, which would give us the chance to give the boys on the hill some jobs in engineering, in tourism, in catering. So that's our objective. Move on before we get to the Department of the Ministry of Justice. I said that this building was the station building for the branch line. I'm standing on the platform bit, you're standing where the rails would have run. The rails would have gone up to about where the yellow canopied building is. The building also served as the munitions store for the early airfield. And these things, which look interesting, don't they? They look as if they could be gun platforms. They're actually 1960s silo bases. Move on again. Right, the reason I brought you here is up on top of the hill, you see a big building with a green roof. That's a water tower. Just below it, it's difficult to see in today's conditions, but there is a round building close to the ground with a long slit in it. And that was the original 1913 command centre. So Eastchurch can claim to be the only established airfield in the country with its control tower underground. The big red brick buildings are A and B wing of the open prison. Then the white buildings, which are closer to us, are circa 1920s, 1930s RAF buildings. Now, you may remember when I started to tell you about the place, I mentioned 13th of August 1940. It was the day of Aldertag, or Eagle Day. Luftwaffe arrived 7 o'clock in the morning, bomb all the wooden billets which were on the hill then, turn and strafe all these buildings. And if you look over there, you can see the strafe marks running up the building. So they're 20mm cannon impacts, and fortunately the building survived, particularly because it was an ammunition store at the time.
Difficult.
You can see that they run right up and took out the top window. There has been more than one occasion when I've had to stop the prison filling in the holes. Who I'm talking about if I was to talk about Orville and Wilbur Wright.
Absolutely.
Yes?
Yes.
So the two Americans credited with inventing the aeroplane in 1903. Would it surprise you to know that Orville and Wilbur Wright visited Sheppey?
Nope.
No.
Okay. This photograph.
Only because we've read the book.
This photograph taken in 1909, and everybody in the photograph is concerned with or connected to early British pioneer aviation, except this guy. He's Mr. Andrews, and the only reason he's in the photograph is because he owns the building. And the building is Muswell Manor, down at Laysdown. Orville and Wilbur Wright. Charlie Rolls, as in Rolls Royce. J.T. Seymour Brabazon. The three Short brothers, Horace with the big head, and ask me why he had a big head in a moment. Frank McLean, Hedges Butler, Dr. Lockyer, and one of the English Wright brothers not related to the two Americans. And the reason for the photograph is to commemorate the fact that Hedges Butler, who is the Wright's English patent agent, has persuaded them to give license for the three Shorts to build the first 6 Wright flyers in the UK. So, what the Shorts do is set up a factory, and if we come up here a bit.
Again, it's a conservation area where they should be fishing.
If you look at this illustration, which is repeated pretty much there, where the white mark is pretty much where we are standing at the moment. This building built 1923, and that's Stone Pit's farmhouse that Frank McLean bought. So you are standing on the site of the first aircraft factory, certainly in the UK and probably on the planet. First commercial flight ever, again, J.T. Seymour Brabazon puts a wicker waste paper basket on his plane and puts a piglet in it, takes it for a flight. Piglet is called Icarus II. And for many years I had thought that the piglet survived the flight but ended up as everybody's dinner that day. Until about 3 months ago, somebody walked through the door with a press cutting from the Daily Mirror for the next day, and with it was a picture of the local farmer, a Mr. Park, taking the piglet home over his shoulder as a pet. So, if I can show you this, this is the Wright flyer as designed by the brothers in 1903, and it's going in that direction.
That's interesting.
Whichever brother is flying it is lying down on the lower wing, one to counterbalance the weight of the engine. In his hands he's got control of the elevator for up and down. His feet control the fin for left and right. And what cracked it for the Americans was he's lying in what they called a saddle. And by moving his hips he can warp the wings. And what that does is give control in the turn. So you've now, for the first time, got an aircraft that will go where you point it, rather than just being blown about by the local winds. You'll have an opportunity to wander around on your own a little later. So if there's anything I've said that you've got questions on, please do come and ask me or by 2 volunteers.
Why has he got such a big head?
Oh yeah, right. Horace's head. The story goes that he was dropped on his head as a baby, and he developed a condition called hydrocephalus, which is more commonly known as water on the brain. And we know what's good for water on the brain, don't we?
Tap on the head.
Who said it? Yeah, well done. A tap on the head. But he was a mechanical genius. He'd been to France in 1908 and he'd flown with the Wrights at Pau, near Le Mans. And he had an inkling that the contract might come up for the 6 Wright flyers. And he asked them for technical drawings. And they said, well, we don't have any. We've simply made it up as we've gone along. So he measured the aircraft, he sketched it, and one of the pages of his sketchbook is just at the bottom of that display there. And he came home to Parsonage Farm, which is just up the road here, before the roundabout, and he drew technical drawings from memory. So, mechanical genius. He then gets his hands on the design of the Wright Flyer, and one of the first things he does is put an upright seat in it. So now you've got control to hand and feet. The next thing he does, because he's got a much better, more powerful engine available to him, is put wheels on the bottom. So you can now get the thing off the ground from a standing start, rather than using the acceleration system that the Wright brothers had invented. The scale of this is wrong. Either the aircraft should be much bigger or this should be much smaller, but it's effectively a half-ton weight. The aircraft sits on the dolly. When the pilot is satisfied that he's got the engine running and the props turning, kicks a catch, it drops the weight and it accelerates the aircraft up to about 30 knots, which will hopefully, with the props turning, provide enough thrust to get the thing going. I mean, often it didn't. The disadvantage of this is that it takes 2 hours to set up. It's got to be set up into wind, and within those 2 hours the wind direction can change, which is why Horace wasn't happy with it and wanted to change the system. So, if we come round here,
yeah, it's so funny when we were talking, my grandchildren, we've got 2 grandchildren and the older one, Sophie, what 21 this year.
so this brings us up to the Second World War. There's a map of the airfield in the 1940s, 700 acres, always a grass field. There are 3 prisons on site now. One is Stanford Hill Open Prison, which stands about there. You've got Elmley, which is category A, and Remand stands there, and Swaleside stands about there. But there's the branch line coming in from the Sheppey Light Railway. The building that we're standing in is marked, it's just there.
Yeah.
Then, returning to the 13th of August 1940, the Aldertag raid. This painting was donated fairly recently. That's Warden Point. That's the sands at Laysdown. That's RAF Laysdown, of which there's a model just behind you 2 ladies there that you can have a look at later. And then on the point is where the big picture was taken, Muswell Manor. In this picture, Dornier DO-17 is being seen off by Hurricanes of 151 Squadron. Okay, we come around here.
The American was shot on the road back to Texas. I shot it about 35 miles up into the air, and from one produced the first pictures of the Earth from space.
So many people ask, why was Sheppey chosen by the early fixed-wing pioneers? And the answer is that most of them had been balloonists, most of them flying coal gas filled balloons from southeast London with a prevailing westerly wind. So they would have known from their balloon Sheppey as relatively round, relatively flat, relatively green, surrounded by water, line of sight navigation. If you don't stop on Sheppey, your next stop is Norway. Belgium if you're lucky, if the wind's in the right direction. So they would have known Sheppey. The main agriculture of the island is, the main economy of the island is agriculture, and that's becoming more technical, so there's workforce available. Good communications. Got the Sheppey Light Railway running down the spine of the island. You can get from Queenborough from Victoria to Queenborough by steam express in 59 minutes. which is better than today's service. You've got every possible skill you could need up in Sheerness dockyard, shipwrights, carpenters, blacksmiths, riggers, whatever, and they're under military discipline. And we're only 50 miles from London. That's why Sheppey was chosen. Why, you might ask, has Sheppey not got a better reputation or is more widely known as the start of British aviation? And the answer to that, I believe, is that this was the place where the technical development was done. Places like Brooklands and Latham's Plain, and Salisbury Plain, were where the rich guys played at the sport of aviation. This is where the Short brothers developed aircraft and went on to design many different kinds of the first aircraft to serve on aircraft carriers with folding wings. I mean, just so many firsts in British aviation were enacted or thought of here. So, that's the lightning tour. Anybody got any questions? Either me or Jim or Jerry can hopefully answer them for you. The exhibition starts over by the big picture and wanders up and down the aisles. So I will leave you to wander to your heart's content.
Excellent.
Eastchurch was, if not the first, certainly one of the dating from 1908 actually, when Charlie Rolls was practicing with a glider, pushing it off Stamford Hill. Right through to the First World War, through the First World War, between the wars, right up to the end of the Second World War, 1947, say. Then the RAF said, we have no further need of the airfield. Lots of wooden billet accommodation. So the Home Office said, we will house returning civil servants from the independence of India and Pakistan. Up until 1950, they saw that that worked and turned it into the second open prison in the UK.
When you say open prison, what do you
Yeah.
mean? Can they just walk out any time they want?
No, they would be under license. It's mostly guys coming to the end. It's a male prison. It's mostly guys coming to the end of their sentences who have been good boys and either had their sentences reduced or simply coming towards the end, coming towards release. And part of our ethic here in Eastchurch Aviation Museum is to attempt to reduce reoffending by giving them jobs as volunteers. Our two volunteers this morning are not, they are civilian volunteers, not offenders. But you will see offenders wandering about, but they are under control. They will need to be licensed to be out in the open. Whereas Elmley, which is Series A and Remand, and the other one are banged up to rights 24/7.
I didn't, sorry again. First time I ever come down here, I didn't realise so many people lived so close to the prisons.
Right.
But I was totally gobsmacked that
Yeah.
people lived that close.
There's bits of the RAF structure which are fairly well hidden. As you come down towards the gatehouse for this prison, this open prison, there is a set of buildings which locally are called Coronation Street, and they were mainly WAF establishment, Women's Royal Air Force. You can't see them from the road very well because they're hidden behind trees. Otherwise, these buildings are, and the big brick building and the 1912 hangars are pretty much all that's left.
So did they build the houses for people working here?
Yeah.
And
Houses-
it's just grown from that?
Yeah, it started 1910 when the early aviators moved up here from Laysdown, and then the buildings were built. One we're in 1923, the big yellow brick building 1917, 1923, 1930s for some of the white buildings we saw.
I believe the houses, the people that lived at Eastchurch, are the ones that lived the other side of the roundabout, because I didn't realise so many people lived this side of the roundabout.
Right, the other side of the roundabout would be regarded as in the parish of Eastchurch, not to do with the prisons.
Oh.
The RAF station started, as you come off the roundabout and come down towards the prison, if you look over to your right, there is a 16th century farmhouse. That's Parsonage Farm. That's where Horace Short lived. He died there in 1917, aged 47. And in a corner of the field, you can, if you know where you're looking, see one of the P8 pillboxes still standing. You can see another one just on the corner here. So that's the start of the airfield.
I've always wondered why Eastchurch was split into two.
Eastchurch is the village and has been around since Anglo-Saxon times, which is a bit early for the RAF.
Thank you.
Thank you.